There are moments when nations speak, and then there are moments when the soil itself screams. For decades, the narrative of West Africa has been written in the ink of instability, whispered through the corridors of foreign ministries, and broadcast as a series of unfortunate events. But history is not a series of accidents. It is a series of signatures. On February 17, 26, a signature in Rome echoed across the Atlantic to the shores of the Ivory Coast. The Italian energy giant, Eni, announced a discovery that should have changed the trajectory of a continent. 5 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 450 million barrels of condensate. To put that into perspective, this is not just a find. This is a geopolitical jackpot. It is the equivalent of discovering a new Qatar off the West African coast. In the same week, just south in Angola, 500 million more barrels were confirmed. Billions of barrels of hydrocarbons, trillions of feet of gas, wealth that could, in theory, ignite an industrial revolution from Abidjan to Luanda. It could build the hospitals, the universities, and the high-speed rails that have been promised for 60 years. Yet, if you didn't see this on the front page of every major newspaper, now you know why you watch Pan-Africa Spotlight. Because while the gas stays in the African soil, the value has already been digitized and shipped to Milan. If this story moves you, if you believe these narratives need witnesses who understand the stakes, like, comment, and subscribe. These stories are being written in real time, and Pan-Africa Spotlight is here to ensure they are no longer silenced. The tension is as old as the maps drawn in Berlin in 1884. Eni is Italian. The expertise is European. The contracts are governed by laws written in London. While the Ivory Coast may receive royalties and a few thousand jobs, the lion's share of the wealth flows back to shareholders in Milan. It is a system of extraction without transformation. In Paris, they drink champagne to celebrate energy security. In Abidjan, the people still walk through the red dust of unpaved roads. This is the invisible architecture of power. It is the reason why Africa, the wealthiest region on this planet in terms of natural assets, remains the headquarters of global poverty. The system was not broken. It was designed this way. It was designed to ensure that even when we find gold, we remain in debt. Even when we find gas, we remain in the dark. But then came the interruption. In the heart of the Sahel, a different kind of energy was brewing. Not one found in the sea, but one forged in the barracks of Burkina Faso. To understand the present, we must look at the ghost that haunts every speech made by the new generation of leaders. Thomas Sankara. Sankara famously warned, "He who feeds you controls you." They believed that true sovereignty wasn't a flag or an anthem. It was the ability to manufacture your own future. For 30 years, that dream was buried. Until September 22, when a 34-year-old captain named Ibrahim Traore stepped into the light. They didn't come with the polished vocabulary of a career diplomat. They came with the fatigue of a soldier who had seen his comrades die in a war funded by the very resources they were supposed to protect. But the gas was just the beginning. What Ibrahim Traore did next would send shockwaves through every boardroom from London to Washington. How far was he willing to go? And more importantly, how far would the old empires go to stop him? While the energy giants were counting their cubic feet of gas in the Gulf of Guinea, a more volatile alchemy was taking place in the capital of Burkina Faso. Ouagadougou, once a quiet outpost of French influence, has become the new laboratory for a global realignment. On February 23, 26, the world watched a handshake that defied decades of Western diplomatic orthodoxy. Two men, both in military fatigues, stood before the cameras in Tehran. One was Iran's defense minister, Brigadier General Aziz Nasirzadeh. The other, Burkina Faso's defense minister, Major General Kassoum Coulibaly. Nasirzadeh did not speak of aid or humanitarian concern. They spoke of popular movements against colonial policies. This was not a mere diplomatic courtesy. This was a brand pivot for a nation under heavy international sanctions. Iran, long isolated by the West, is now positioning itself as the champion of African liberation. But let us be clear about the strategy. Iran is not acting out of Pan-African love. They are looking for silent gold. The Sahel sits on some of the world's richest gold reserves. Burkina Faso is growing faster in this sector than almost any other nation in the region. For Iran, Iranian weapons for Burkinabe gold is the ultimate deal structure. It is sanction evasion at its most sophisticated. But for Ibrahim Traore, it is something more. It is a message to the world. If you will not sell us the tools to defend our soil, we will find those who will. The traditional partners are gone. France's ambassador was expelled. U.S. military ties have been severed. When your villages are burning and your traditional allies are busy lecturing you about election cycles, you answer the phone when Tehran or Moscow calls. This is the reality of the new Sahel. Pause here for a moment. If you respect the courage of a nation standing its ground, write "Thank you" to the people of Burkina Faso in the comments. Your words matter in a world trying to silence this movement. Yet, this story contains a paradox that would baffle any political scientist. While Ibrahim Traore calls Russia his strategic ally and welcomes Russian military personnel to his soil, another transaction was taking place behind the scenes. On February 25, 26, the United States and Burkina Faso signed a 5-year health cooperation deal worth $147 million. Think about that for a second. The same government that expelled France and welcomed Wagner Group successors just accepted a massive check from Washington. To the casual observer, this looks like hypocrisy. To the strategist, it is smart diplomacy. Small countries have played this game since the Cold War, extracting maximum benefit by playing multiple superpowers against each other. But there is a deeper, more uncomfortable truth here. The U.S. needs a reason to stay relevant in the Sahel. With their air bases gone and their influence waning, health funding is the only door left unlocked. No one refuses medicine for malaria or HIV. It is the soft power anchor in a sea of hard power shifts. But the contracts were signed, and victory seemed complete. Yet, the gold kept flowing, away from the people. How could sovereignty be declared, and wealth still be stolen? The answer lies in the invisible architecture of power. And that architecture was about to be exposed. We must ask ourselves a difficult question. Can a nation truly be free if its currency is printed elsewhere, its resources are priced in London, and its security is outsourced to the highest bidder? This is the crossroads where Ibrahim Traore now stands. He invokes the name of Thomas Sankara, the man who dreamed of a self-sufficient Africa. But the reality of 2026 is a tangled web of dependencies that cannot be cut with a single bayonet. He who feeds you controls you, Sankara warned. Today we might add, he who finances you owns you. For decades, the African continent has been trapped in a cycle of aid dependency, where loans from Western institutions come with strings that dictate everything from domestic policy to energy exports. But a new model is emerging from the shadows. Enter the Afreximbank, the African Export-Import Bank. While the world was looking at the Italian gas deal in Ivory Coast, Afreximbank quietly demonstrated what is possible. They financed a $100 million energy project in Guyana. It was Pan-African financing for African-led extraction. It was a signal that the institutional muscles of the continent are finally beginning to flex. If African banks start to fund African mines, the calculus of power changes forever. The pen finally moves from the hands of a foreign shareholder into the hands of an African banker. However, in the dusty streets of Ouagadougou, the clock is ticking. Ibrahim Traore has built his identity on the rejection of foreign interference. Yet, his critics point to a glaring contradiction. You cannot preach absolute independence while signing security agreements with Tehran in the morning and accepting health checks from Washington in the afternoon. Is this a masterful game of chess, or is it merely trading one master for three? The Sahel is not just fighting a war against insurgents. It is fighting a war against time. 4 million people in Burkina Faso are currently cut off from basic health care. Over 400 health facilities are non-operational. When Ibrahim Traore looks at the $147 million aid package from the U.S., He doesn't just see imperialist money. He sees the lives of children who will die of malaria without it. This is the heavy, lonely burden of leadership, the collision between revolutionary purity and human necessity. If you believe these stories deserve this level of depth, if you want to support a channel that looks beyond the headlines, become a member of Pan-Africa Spotlight. Join us in documenting the rebirth of a continent. The true sovereignty play, the one Sankara actually died for, is not about switching allies. It is about building internal capacity. It is about manufacturing your own medicine, refining your own gold, and training your own engineers. Until the day comes when Burkina Faso does not need a check from Washington to keep its clinics open, the speeches about independence remain, unfortunately, just speeches. The pieces of the puzzle are on the table. The Confederation of Sahel States is meeting this week to align their development roadmap. They are trying to build a fortress of self-reliance in a world built on extraction. They stood at the crossroads. One path, compromise, stability, survival. The other, confrontation, chaos, perhaps martyrdom. The call came at 3 a.m. 7 words. They would define not just his fate, but the fate of millions. What he said next, there was no going back from.